Why is it that Belgium, Mexico, the UK have recently released what were at one time top secret classified documents to the public, discussing and talking and revealing the presence of so-called extraterrestrial objects in our airspace?
75, Sirius is performing quite well.
If we only had 1 or 2 sightings per year, I wouldn't be talking about this. But I'll give you an example. In 1950, the year I was born, there was 1 sighting reported in the month of December. Fast forward to 2008, and we now have over 350 sightings all over the world. Can we at least agree that we may differ as to what is the cause of the phenomena? We can agree that UFOs are real, burgeoning, and not going away. We were driving home, minding our own business, certainly not looking for UFOs. My wife was driving, I'm in the passenger seat. She looks up and she goes, "Wow, what's that?" I go, "What?" She goes, "There." I look up and sure enough, through the windshield, this large, very powerful light. First I thought it was an airplane coming at us, because when a plane comes right at you, you see that headlight, and it's very easily mistaken for an unidentified flying object. This thing didn't move, and my wife had to take her eyes off it, but she was driving. But I kept my eyes trained on it, and I began to notice that there were no blinking lights, that the thing moved. Well, after watching it for about a minute, a second light appears and slowly descends into the main light, and then the main light disintegrates in concentric circles. Well, that is something that is anomalous. I think we can agree on that. Was it a craft from another dimension or another solar system or galaxy? I have no idea. I can't say what it was. All I can tell you that it was an anomalous light. This kind of sighting has been reported for decades now all across the globe. We're also seeing what I would consider nuts and bolts craft, and I realize there are people who disagree with this particular theory or concept or position, but I believe that these craft are real. They are made in another dimension, and they are used to travel between this dimension and or this dimension and the second heaven, or this other dimension that these entities really reside in. Some of these craft are enormous. For instance, in 2007 over the English Channel, mile-wide craft were seen by 2 different pilots, as well as that same craft being shown on radars. Look, if it was 1 or 2 sightings per month, we wouldn't be discussing this, but it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds per month. And now when we look at the whole scope of ufology and realizing that this phenomena is not going away, it's time to sort of cast off the shackles of ridicule and fear and examine this thing head on and decide what paradigm works the best to explain the phenomenon.
Question number 2. What factual proof is there of UFOs?
People are always going, where's the hardcore evidence? Where's the facts behind the whole ufology? Well, some of this is really being obfuscated and deliberately obfuscated by the governments of the world. We know that certain countries like Mexico, France, Japan, Brazil, the UK, and Belgium, all have released what were at one time classified documents and now released that to the public, stating that this stuff is real.
Question number 3. Can you give an example?
Edgar Mitchell, a former Apollo astronaut, went on the record on Kerrang radio. And after he sort of announced it on Kerrang radio several years back, I saw him again on the Fox News channel with Sean Hannity on a sit-down one-on-one. And Edgar Mitchell's basically stating, look, Roswell was real. There was a crash and bodies that were recovered from Roswell, and our government covered it up.
Yes, there's not much question at all. What there's life throughout the universe. We're not alone in the universe at all.
You're convinced that we're not alone in the universe?
Oh, I know for sure we're not alone in the universe. And I happen to be privileged enough to have be in on the fact that we have been visited on this planet. And the UFO phenomenon is real, although it's been covered up by our governments for quite a long time. It is a real phenomenon. And there's quite a few of us that it's been well covered up by all of our governments for the last 60 years or so, but slowly it's leaked out, and some of us are privileged to have been briefed on some of it, but I've also been in military circles and intelligence circles that knows beneath the surface of what has been public knowledge that yes, we have existed.
He believes that, like I do, that there is a cover-up. We just have a discrepancy in our worldview as to what's behind the phenomena. Again, he's extraterrestrial, I'm interdimensional, and specifically the fallen ones, fallen angels, which we read about back in Genesis 6, once again manifesting on the earth. So there is evidence. There's plenty of evidence. We've got the witnesses, hundreds, thousands of witnesses who have come on the record.
Question number 4. Are people interacting with UFOs now?
There's a guy in Vegas. His name is Prophet Yahweh. I've actually interviewed him. And his big claim to fame is one particular time he was able to summon a light in the sky, a craft, a UFO.
We met up with Prophet Yahweh, seer of Yahweh, at Doolittle Park off Lake Mead. We picked the day, we picked the time, and we picked the location. So we took him up on his offer, and we scanned the skies. Nothing but a few clouds. When the prophet started praying for a sighting, I wasn't exactly convinced.
I pray, oh Yahweh, that you send a sighting so that they know that I am not mentally ill. I am not a false prophet, like those who seek to kill me say I am.
I see something straight up.
Oh, brother, look at it. There it is.
You can barely see it, a white speck. Then another sighting.
There it is. I got it.
Photojournalist Jonathan Hawkins locks in on it. Let's take a closer look here. It's an orange sphere that appeared out of nowhere. I call the boss with an unexpected change in my story. I can see it clear as day. In fact, it's bright.
I can't believe this.
It's moving pretty fast.
It's going to Nellis Air Force Base. It wants to be seen.
We called Nellis to see what these things might be. Guess what? They didn't call us back. But this thing started coming back toward us.
Yeah.
It's coming toward us now, I think.
What?
See, it's coming up toward us.
Whoa, man! Oh, hallelujah!
Then, a few seconds later, it disappeared.
It's going back up in space.
Prophet Yahweh isn't concerned. He says it'll be back.
And the camera people were just stunned. They were shocked. They couldn't believe it. This, of course, made national, international news and put Prophet Yahweh on the map. Just recently, there was an article, and I love the way they released this stuff after everyone's dead and there's no way to vet the story. Talked about Churchill and Eisenhower, and apparently Churchill knew of an encounter with a disc and a plane and put the kibosh on it, and both he and Eisenhower got together and said, nope, can't let this story go out. It's going to cause mass panic in the population, and it will make people leave or lose their religious beliefs. And so, you know, this happens decades after the fact. There's no way to call up Churchill or Eisenhower and ask them to vet the story. They're dead, as most of the witnesses are dead. It's one of those stories that comes out from time to time that hints at a deliberate obfuscation of the facts, not only by our government, but certainly the UK and other governments of the world.
Question number 5. What is going on at ESETI Ranch?
We know that another dimension may exist. We know this from string theory, from quantum physics. We know that from Einstein's equation that nothing can actually approach the speed of light. What happens after that? Jane, what did you see at the ESETI Ranch?
A UFO highway. Some were huge, some were small, some were green lights, some were red lights, some were yellow lights. I also saw fairies. Fairies are real. People, look at cute fairies in books and whatnot, and they are malevolent. The biggest one I saw was like 12 inches. The noise was unbelievable from these little things. I have some pictures that are so clear you can almost see their toes.
Question number 6. What are orbs?
What we're seeing up in ESETI Ranch, and certainly other places, people are seeing these orbs. It's a global phenomenon. The question is, what are these orbs? And what is the source behind these orbs? And I find it very troubling that certain circles are embracing these orbs as something that's benevolent. They're in crop circles, above crop circles. It's a global phenomenon. People see them in the sky. Jaime Maussan's photograph of the Mexican UFO flap that happened in Mexico, where hundreds of these orbs are seen in the sky. They appear all over. It's a global phenomenon. In the United States, people see and record orbs. What are they? We're living in the age of deception. We can be so easily deceived. These orbs appear as balls of light. It's a global phenomenon. When the orbs come in, they'll come as different colors. They appear and disappear. They kind of flit in and out of dimensions, as it were. First they're there, then they're not there. Sometimes we see from these very bright orbs in daylight, very large orbs, we see other orbs coming and emanating from them, which then come back into them. Very, very bizarre, strange phenomena. What we need to understand and come to grips with is just because I have a supernatural experience, just because I see orbs or something manifests like a UFO, or an entity begins to communicate with me telepathically, that doesn't mean it's a good thing. And it certainly doesn't mean we should embrace it. In my research, which has been going on for basically 30 years, I have discovered that people who have experienced this type of supernatural manifestation, whether it's telepathic communication by so-called extraterrestrial entities or the manifestation of orbs, there's always a doorway open into the supernatural. They have engaged in some sort of illicit behavior. You can only test the spirit or spirits, what's coming at you, from a standpoint of you haven't opened yourself up by illicit means to some sort of communication from interdimensional beings. Let me say that again a little simpler, perhaps. If we engage in necromancy, we've already crossed the line. There's no way to test the spirits at that point, in my opinion. However, if we have an experience, let's say, we're not engaged in mediumship or necromancy or fortune teller or Ouija boards or familiar spirits or talking of the dead, any of this stuff. We're not engaged. We're just walking along, and we have a vision, let's say. At that point, we can test a vision. Or if a spirit manifests and appears in the room, at that point, it's very easy to test the spirits. And the Guidebook of the Supernatural tells us and admonishes us to test the spirits, and there are certain ways in which we can do that.
Question number 7. What does the Guidebook of the Supernatural say about these things?
The Guidebook is rife with examples of the supernatural manifesting with mankind. And it also warns us of and gives us examples of how to engage, how to disengage, how not to engage, how to let's say fight against some of these adversaries which may come up against us. Yeah, the Guidebook is chock full of examples of this kind of fallen angels or even the good angels engaging us. The difference between them, when the fallen ones manifest, okay, it's always fear. It's always a fear-based deal, always fear-based, and it's also sometimes on the other hand that we hear that the fallen ones can appear as angels of light. So the angle here is deception, and this is why just because something may appear benevolent, it might not be.
Question number 8. Why do people feel the phenomena is benevolent?
People today have no paradigm, for the most part, on how to deal with anything supernatural. And so when they are pressed with it, when it comes into their realm of reality, they have nothing to grasp, nothing to hold on to. No paradigm in which to embrace this, for the most part. Oftentimes, people will look at the phenomena and just embrace it, just let it in. Just believe that, oh, it must be benevolent. And nothing, in my opinion, nothing is more dangerous than that. Look, we've got shows like Ghostbusters that are on. With all due respect to those guys, they're playing with fire. Now, they're protected on some level, but at some point in time, and who knows when that's going to be, they're going to cross the line and something very negative may happen. They're dealing with entities that are extremely powerful and malicious, malevolent, evil entities. And this is the problem. Unless unless a person knows how to test the spirits, knows what they're up against, and understands and realizes that our weapons in which we engage these entities are not carnal. What I mean by that, they're not guns and knives and fists and karate and all this kind of stuff. Our weapons must be of a spiritual nature.
Question number 9. What other phenomena is going on?
There's different aspects of the phenomenon. Not only do we have UFO sightings appearing all over the world, but we've got cattle mutilations, human mutilations, crop circles, so-called abductions, the so-called breeding program, and alien implants. Now I realize, if you have never heard or traveled in those subjects before, that can be like, you're kidding me. And yet just a modicum of research will show that the phenomena is real, burgeoning, and not going away. Let's take cattle mutilations. Cattle mutilations have been going on in different parts of the world literally for decades. Specifically, if we go to the Southwest in the United States, New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, we see cattle mutilations that go back literally 30, 40 years. Law enforcement has yet to bring one person, to charge one person with a crime. There's a MUFON investigator, his name is Chuck Zukowski. What he has discovered is the cattle, once again, are taken. Different parts of them are excised, removed from the animal with surgical precision. There's no blood left in the cattle or the particular carcass. They're usually dropped in the middle of a field, no footprints. While that might sound certainly bizarre, what we do have is the animals themselves, the carcasses, the remains. And we also have certain anomalies around the animal. We have where sometimes the grass in the area right around the animal won't grow the same way that the other indigenous plants would be growing just a few feet away. We get spikes in radioactivity. We'll get spikes in electromagnetic frequencies.
It's really pegging here. If this was ghost hunters, I'd say that there was a spirit in there. So we're getting electromagnetic field coming from this area. Is there a tag in the ear? Let's see if it's getting off the radio wave.
Whatever's going on is extremely bizarre. Again, no blood. Tongues are taken, ears, eyes, the jaws are stripped down of flesh. Sex organs are cored out. Anuses are cored out. Udders are stripped and taken. It's incredibly grisly and horrific. The bottom line is this. With all this going on, why dump it back into the rancher's field? Why would anyone do that? Of course, it's deliberate because what it creates is a climate of fear. A man living way out in the country with his family decides to go deer hunting, and he tells his wife he's going to sort of scope out the area, hops on his ATV and says, look, I'll be gone for a couple hours. A couple more hours go by and she finally calls search and rescue. They find the ATV rather quickly. It's where he said he was going, on top of this hill. What's bizarre is no signs of a struggle, no footprints near the ATV. It's been like he's just vanished in the thin air. What they do find is his shoe high up in a tree about 50 feet away. How did his shoe get there? 36 hours later, they find his naked body concealed in a thicket near the house. It's been drained of blood. He's like this, with his mouth open and like that. He's obviously terrorized. Next to him is a dead rattlesnake. There's no blood in the dead rattlesnake. The body was removed without a coroner being present. There's the first thing. The second thing is the family is not allowed to view the body. 2 weeks later, the body is returned to the family in a welded steel casket. Cause of death, cocaine overdose. The family, was absolutely taken aback by this because they knew the father, the husband, and there was no drugs involved. So something is going on. Some agency deliberately obfuscated the information, not only from the family, but from investigators who were trying to find out what really happened. And so I believe that some of this is really very much repressed. But we do have two cases, the one in Brazil, graphic photograph and an autopsy report, and the one in Pennsylvania. We need to differentiate between orbs and UFOs. Now, this is just a theory. An orb is not a UFO. It's unidentified. We don't know what it is. But in the classic sense of nuts and bolts, orbs seem to be more ethereal. They seem to be orbs of light and light only. They're not manifesting as nuts and bolts hardware like we have in the classic silver discs that are seen, or classic craft that fly by jets like at 10,000 or 20,000 miles an hour. It's a whole different deal. Orbs are different. When Prophet Yahweh summoned that UFO, I believe it was not a craft. I believe it was an orb. There's a difference there. When we showed photographs of orbs at Isetti Ranch. These are not UFOs. I mean, in the sense of classical dish-shaped craft, these are orbs that are floating by. When we showed you different pictures of men and women, and there's orbs around them, something is manifesting, isn't it? But it's not nuts and bolts craft. Something is manifesting, perhaps from another dimension. There are those who would say, well, there's something, dirty lenses in the camera or whatever. It's not what we're looking at here. Certainly the Isetti footage would show that, Prophet Yahweh. Obviously, something is manifesting. And so again, I would point to the interdimensional hypothesis as the paradigm that best suits what we're looking at. They flit in and out between this dimension and another dimension. And this is why it's important for us to differentiate between orbs and craft. When that pilot in 2007, 2 pilots in the English Channel and on radar, and they see a craft which is a mile wide.
The only person who saw this phenomenon, what were you? There were some passengers who saw it, and also another pilot.
Yes.
Simultaneously?
Any object from 50 miles away must have been fairly enormous.
What about a mile long?
It's possible, yeah.
Did it move at all?
It probably didn't move, but I had the great opportunity the other day from Jersey Air Traffic Control of visiting their radar room, and some interesting traces, let's put it that way, from the radar
really?
Indicate that there's a possibility that they did pick up on, from both Guernsey and Jersey radar, traces, spurious traces they call, for around about 55 minutes.
How long did you see it for?
I saw it in total for 12 minutes.
When Ricky Soros in Stevensville, Texas looks up and sees a craft.
This thing, it was above me about 300 foot. You know, the funny thing about it was flat, and I would have expected it to take off at an angle like this, but it didn't, and I was actually watching underneath, and when it took off so fast, if I would have blinked, I would have thought it vanished, but I had my eyes on it, and I know it took off flat at a 45-degree angle. These are not orbs. This is hardcore craft, and it's used to flit between one dimension and the other. And we also got a preponderance of physical evidence with the craft. We've got landing sites where there's pods in the ground. We've got spikes in radioactivity, spikes in electromagnetic field around certain areas where these craft have come down. And then we've got tens of thousands of witnesses who have literally seen cigar-shaped, triangle, pyramidal, and of course the classic silver disc. What's really interesting is that this phenomena is showing up not only in television and movies and books and novels and popular culture and video games. You pick up a music magazine and all of a sudden you realize that, oh my gosh, they're talking about orbs. They're talking about a psychic or supernatural phenomena. It talks about there were 10 to 12 grown men who experienced these orbs coming into the rooms or whatever, and they were absolutely terrified. The classic abduction scenario is simply this. You're laying in bed with your husband or wife, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. You awaken out of a sound sleep. And the first thing you realize and you're aware of is that you're paralyzed and you can't move. The second is you're aware of a presence in the room. Somebody or something is in the room. You start to look around with your eyes and you catch in your peripheral vision these beings which are about 3 to 4 foot tall. You awaken. They're there. The next thing you realize is you're being levitated off the bed, which defies our physics, by the way. How can they possibly be doing this? You try to scream, find that you can't. You wonder why your husband or wife has not awakened also. And you're then floated through walls, windows, doors, unbelievable stuff. And I realize that from our perspective, it's like, what are we looking at? How can, this is defying and breaking all our laws of physics. And I would certainly agree with that. But again, who's ever doing this has either technology or they're moving in ways that we don't understand yet. So for the benefit of this discussion, the person finds themselves floating through the wall and they're taken aboard some sort of a ship. They find themselves on a metallic table covered with a sheet. Their clothes are removed from them at some point. Then they are surrounded again by more 4-foot grays with the large head and the black almond eyes. And this is what we see happening. These people are taken against their will and we see that genetic material, eggs and ovum and sperm are taken from these abductees. And again, it goes into some sort of a breeding program, which Dr. Jacobs has researched. When he first got into this, and I interviewed him for my book, The Alien Interviews, he talks about when he realized that these people weren't crazy, that he sort of went into a shock tailspin for 6 months, walking around saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, just trying to deal with the fact that what he had first thought was, let's say, a psychic break with reality or mentally imbalanced people or whatever. He realized that, in fact, the phenomena was real and that the end game is to create some sort of a human-alien hybrid which will look and pass as human. We're going to go and see a friend of mine, Dr. Roger Lear. Dr. Lear is a podiatrist and a surgeon, and he was drawn into the so-called alien implant removal. He's done about 16 of these surgeries, and they are absolutely phenomenal. We are going to get up close and personal with what these surgeries were and what Dr. Lear discovered when he took these implants out of human beings. What are we looking at here? I mean, I'm looking at, and I can see these like what appear to be implants. The skeptic's going to say, well, it's a BB gun or it's a wire from another operation. What are these objects we're looking at in the x-rays?
Well, I prefer really, Lynn, to take the skeptical point of view because I'm the one that's involved with it. So as far as I'm concerned, these are two cases in which there appears to be metallic foreign body. We don't know whether it's an implant or whether somebody picked up a flying nail. And these are two different cases. As you can see, this one appears to be in the joint, but it's really not. It's in probably soft tissue, with what we call a patellar tendon here. But this is an elongated object, and you can see it's metallic. And we know that it's metallic because in reference to the density of the bone, you can see that it's metal. This one here, these two cases, by the way, have not been done yet. These are pending surgeries that we'll do in the future. We use an X-ray device called a C-arm. And the C-arm is a live mobile unit, so that if you make an incision and you insert an instrument, you can see it as you're doing it. Wow. And it makes it a lot easier to locate the object and clamp it. Sometimes we found in doing these implant cases that the object moves.
I want to stop you there for a moment, because what you just said, I mean, you've traveled in this, you've witnessed it, but for the viewers who are listening to this for the first time, you just said the objects move. Can you clarify that the object moved away from you on its own power somehow? Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. In these cases where you're dealing with a metallic object that's inside the body, you don't see anything from the outside with the naked eye. But when you insert an instrument in the tissue, most of the surgical instruments are stainless steel, and they're supposed to not have any kind of a magnetic field. But for whatever the reason, they seem to react with the magnetic field of the object, and it's as if two like ends of the magnet are towards each other, and the object gets propelled somewhere else. So we've seen this over and over and over again.
I want to get sort of the personal side of the story. When does a person, how do they first contact you and why? What is bothering that person that they would seek you out to begin with?
Well, they usually seek me out now. I mean, this is a drastic difference than when I started this, but we've done 16 surgeries today. So my name is known basically all over the world for doing this kind of research. But so when they come to me today, at today's date and time, they usually feel, number one, that they've been involved in the alien abduction phenomena, and that they have an object, or that they might have an object.
Okay.
What happened to you 20 years ago?
Oh, probably had a car accident, sighting. Learned quite a bit about God and the universe, and very short period of time. I feel to be a very fortunate man. And
Hi. Mike has been in on all these surgeries.
I truly understand the enormity of some of the statements I probably have made.
Yeah. Do you think that...
But I feel that... How do you put it? The truth will set you free, I guess. It's the only way you can look at it.
This was a patient who had one in the wrist. This came out of the wrist, and it's probably was 3/4 bigger than this piece. This piece is left. This one you should be able to get in.
That's very big. Where did that come out of?
This one, if I remember correctly, was out of a forearm.
Now, is that in a blood type serum? Or
this is it, yeah. This is in the serum from the patient. We find that they seem to be quite happy as long as there's some preservative that's like the human body that it came out of.
I understand you've got some scientific data on the alien implants. Can you explain that to us, please?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that we do is we try and look at these objects from the outside in, so to speak. So when we've gotten the amount of data that we need to get from looking at the outside, then we go deeper into the object and try and get more data as we go through it. And one of the modalities for doing this is testing called an SEM and an EDX. And we're actually looking at one instrument, which is the scanning electron microscope.
SEM. Okay.
SEM. And the EDX is only a term for breaking it down to be quite simple, getting the definitive elements that the object is composed of. And for example, here you see that there are two very large peaks. And at the top of the peak, you see there's an FE. Well, an FE stands for iron. So we can tell that the most abundant element in these objects is the iron. So just from looking at that alone doesn't really mean anything. But when you go further through, some of the other graphs, if we were to come up, for example, where we're starting to see nickel in these graphs, and then the ratio of nickel, for example, to the amount of iron that's seen, will give us a clue as to what kind of iron is this. I mean, is this something from Home Depot, or is this something from the Pleiades? So when we see a certain nickel-iron ratio in graphs just like this, we can say in most instances now that we know that it contains meteoric iron, because there's a specific nickel-iron ratio in meteorites. But one of the meteorites found on Earth, one category of meteorites, is a nickel-iron meteorite. Okay. The large meteorite strike in Arizona that created the huge crater was one of these nickel iron meteorites, and of course you can tell by digging through the fragments. So that's the elemental analysis, which is part of scanning electron microscopy. And the other thing, we can use it to take pictures. So we can look at a first few, maybe up to 10 nanometers, just below the surface. Or we can crank up the beam, so to speak, so you get a heavy bombardment of electrons, and we can start to take pictures that are 20 nanometers or 40 nanometers going down through the object.
What did the SEM show you that was anomalous regarding the implants?
We use the data and results, and we can see structures. Structures like carbon nanotubes. You can see this is a structure. And this happens to be a structure, we don't know what it is. So we find things down in the deep crevices of the metal on an atomic level, and they can be ovoids, they can be spheres, or they can have other shapes.
And these do not occur in nature, correct? These nanotubes?
These do not occur in nature, and they don't really occur in the natural process of metallurgy that we use to put, you know, unlike metals together and form a compound metal which we call an alloy. So if we find an alloy of aluminum and iron, it would not look like this. This is something else. Now this is a very interesting one because it shows a line going across here, which is a definitive boundary line. And this is kind of interesting because you don't find in usual metallurgy metallic boundaries such as it's showing
Any
here.
idea what that might be used for?
The only thing that we can come up with is that there were two dissimilar elements that were put together for a reason.
If a skeptic were to look at the evidence, specifically the implants and some of the work that you've done with these, how would they refute them? Metallurgy, which was done off this world. Would you say that this is sort of a smoking gun? Could you call it a smoke? I mean, let me ask, I guess where I'm going with this is there any possible way that our government could create the nanotubes found in these implants, in your opinion?
I personally consider skeptics psychics. I tell them, I say, well, you seem to know everything that there is to know about what I'm talking about or somebody else is talking about, but you never look at the data. So therefore, you must be psychic. So that's in reference to skeptics. Now, in reference to the rest of the question, the smoking gun. Yeah, I would say this is pretty much of a smoking gun. We do know, as I stated before, that black budget science is way, way ahead of academic science. But I tend to doubt, just on a personal basis from what I've seen, that they know how to do all these kind of things. Let's give an example. Let's say if they back-engineered alien craft starting from 1947, Roswell, which may have been crashes before 1947, but this one seemed to have a lot of attention. If they back engineer that and we have a fleet of these craft that we've learned to fly and are flying around them, you know, we've had 60 some odd years to do that with. But does that mean that they understand the totality of what they back engineered? I would, you know, take probably the best scientists, the best physicists that the world is able to buy and bet against it. It takes time for a society, even with hints, to grow to the point where you're able to use everything that an advanced society that's perhaps thousands or millions of years older, how could we catch up in 60 years or 100 years? So it's not logical. So when you say, yes, this is a smoking gun, it's a smoking gun from the standpoint of academic science. Here we have something you can put your finger on, you can look at it through a microscope, feel it, touch it, test it, and it doesn't come from here.
Fascinating. On a personal level, when some of these patients get these implants removed, what are they feeling? Are they feeling fear? Are they elated that they're removed? Just tell us about, on a personal level, what these people go through.
Well, most abductees are in a constant battle with themselves as to the reality of the situation. Many abductees would rather be diagnosed with a specific mental disease, which could be treatable, than to say I am the victim of somebody coming here from some society somewhere else and taking me against my will for some unknown reason and then doing something with my body. So, on the other hand, when they wake up in the morning and they've got a mark that wasn't on their body the night before, or they wake up and they have the feelings of the flu, with muscle aches and pains, extremely thirsty, vivid memories of something that went on, or they wake up and they're not wearing the bedclothes that they went to bed with, then they are in a situation where they begin to wonder, was this a dream or is it a reality? And that begins to carry through. So In most abductees, and I've studied now hundreds, if not thousands of cases, this battle will continue beyond that of a metallic or non-metallic object that's in the body. One of the things that when they come to the realization that we have an x-ray of an object that was in my body that wasn't there the night before, it tends to push them towards the reality that yes, this is a real phenomenon. It's occurring to me, you know, in our real 3D world, not in a dream or some delusional dream state. Right. So then they accept the reality, and then they have to decide whether they want to keep it or whether they want it out. So naturally, all the patients that we've done the removals on have wanted it out.
In your opinion, what do you think that these implants are doing? Are they perhaps changing the very DNA structure of an individual, or maybe they're tracking devices? What do you think about that?
I'm fairly well convinced that they are not tracking devices, and this is based on several interviews I've done with abductees that have had objects that did not want them removed. One was a case in Brazil who had 2 objects in a toe, but she chose not to have it removed. I lost touch with her, and I really don't know what happened. But she told me in discussing what these objects did, I said, well, you think it could be a tracking device? And she just laughed. I mean, she just gave me the horse laugh. And I said, well, why do you think that's so funny? She said, well, let me tell you. There was an episode with ETs in which they stopped a bug in mid-flight right in front of her in some kind of a beam of light or beam of energy. And they told her that they had the ability to track the DNA of that bug anywhere on this planet. So she said, do you think it's really necessary to have a device to do that? Well, that was some years before we, you know, geneticists, earthly geneticists, realized that each one of our DNA strands has its own electrical configuration. So if we were smart enough, and maybe someday we will be smart enough, all we have to do is build a receiver. If we build a receiver for your DNA, I could track you anywhere. So an advanced civilization using an artificial device to track you, I don't believe makes any sense whatsoever. So what do these things do? Some think they could be behavior modification devices. I really came up with a pet theory. I think that since most abductions involve the taking of ova and sperm, that it's pretty safe to say there's some genetic effect that's going on. Now, Dr. David Jacobs thinks they're making hybrid beings to perhaps repopulate the planet in case some disastrous event occurs, or maybe for some other reason. I'm not saying he's wrong. They very well could be a plan to develop hybrids, and maybe there's hybrids among us. But I think that the spectra of the phenomena is so worldwide and involves so many people all over the planet, I don't think that's the main objective of the group who's doing the most of the abductions. I think that it's more logical to me that they're doing something with our genetics, which they have probably done before. Because if you especially would know, if you look into the biblical history, there's things in the Bible that have all kinds of indications that people have been changed from time to time. Going back all the way to the story of the Tower of Babel.
Sure.
We build the tower, it goes up, God doesn't like it, and what does he do?
Confuses everyone's language.
He confuses the language. Well, what's the converse of that? If he confuses the language so that you can't communicate, and there were, you know, some extensive geographical areas which had to develop, as we did, our own language, then how did we communicate before? But there are people that I have met personally that if there is such a thing as a hybrid, they sure fill the bill.
How would you, describe that, elaborate on that for us?
Well, I can give you a classic example. I did last year, I think it was the Bay Area UFO Expo, and a tall fellow with sparse blonde hair came up and was sort of listening to one of our conversations and seemed to be very interested and so on. And one of the members of our group struck up a conversation with him. And in the course of the conversation, he was asked, "Where do you come from?" He said, "Well, I came from a long way to this conference to hear, what you researchers have had to say." And it's, well, how far did you come? Well, I came from Colorado. And yeah, well, that's really great. What do you do? Well, I'm a computer electronics engineer. I work with the computers. And he was asked, he said, "Well, I guess you're probably a really good skier." And he said, "A what?" Skiing. Don't you go skiing? Right. And he said, "What's skiing?"
Whoa.
Well, I think to myself many times, what would it take to convince the masses? Because it would have to, if President Obama came out on national television and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I have something to tell you. This is one of the most important things that's happened to mankind. We now know that there are extrasolar planets that have life forms like us, and not only that, but we've learned that they are and have been visiting here for many, many years." I would predict that the following thing would happen: would people, turn the dial and find out what the score on the Lakers game is, or a craft, for example, about mass land. A craft comes down, lands at rush hour time in the middle of a Hollywood freeway. Talk about panic. Yeah, I think there really would be a panic, because people would be right away on their cell phones calling some division of the state, Caltrans, to find out when they were going to get it out of there so that they could get home, to watch the Rams. That would be the panic.
That's it.
So people are so
knowledge. The first cooperative venture was the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. That was a cooperative venture with the United States Air Force and the movie industry. We provided the basic subject matter for the movie Close Encounters. Based on such revelations, we must question just how much UFO truth has our government embedded in 6 decades of Hollywood science fiction films and television programs. Ultimately, out of this frothy entertainment souffle, what one creature has emerged as the single most iconic representation of extraterrestrials? Worldwide, what creature is most instantly recognized as an alien space visitor? The unrivaled star, the unquestioned media darling to emerge from this marketing blitz has been the Zeta Reticulum Gray. Either by accident or design, the relentless insectoid stare of the Zeta Gray is everywhere, on book covers, coffee mugs, t-shirts, bumper stickers, and keychains. Zeta Gray has been a merchandising phenomena, hawking everything from soda pop to bank cards. The Zetas even abduct the kitty cartoon character Gumby. Clearly, the only alien worthy of officially unofficial notice is the Zeta Gray. Public awareness of these grays first came to light in 1966 with the book Interrupted Journey, which was the account of Betty and Barney Hill's abduction in New Hampshire in 1961. With subsequent books such as Bud Hopkins' Intruders, Ray Fowler's The Andreasen Affair, and Whitley Strieber's Communion, more media attention and credibility has been given to the Greys. However, what seemed at least an attempt at official disclosure came on October 14, 1988, in the guise of a 2-hour television special entitled UFO Cover-Up Live. Promising to expose the real truth about UFOs, this unprecedented special was aired simultaneously in the United States and the Soviet Union. This program promised an open and unbiased examination of the UFO issue. Yet at the outset, congenial host Mike Farrell, from the popular MASH TV series, summarily dismissed the famous Billy Meyer Pleiadian contact case as a complete hoax, without offering viewers the least shred of evidence pro or con to draw their own conclusions. Instead, Farrell proceeded to introduce a disclosure of sorts about the Zeta Reticulum Greys, which obviously was the primary focus of the show. 2 informants purported to be government intelligence operatives, introduced as Falcon and Condor, filmed in shadow and with their voices electronically masked, told the Zeta story. Although no live Greys consented to be shown on camera, a montage of artist illustrations showed the Greys as benign guests of the United States government who had been given a base in Nevada. Falcon and Condor admitted that these creatures came from the Zeta Reticulum star system, but shared no further details as to the nature and purpose of their relationship with our government, save to say the EB, or the extraterrestrial biological entity in custody, was vegetarian, with a hankering for strawberry ice cream. How cute. Yet Falcon's deeply disturbing statement that the aliens had complete control over our nation's most highly guarded weapons installation, Area 51, was casually overlooked. The simultaneous broadcast of this program in both the United States and the Soviet Union suspiciously demonstrated high-level government collusion in its production. Clearly, UFO Cover-Up Live was a commercial of sorts to sell the Greys to the American and Soviet people, with an obvious subtext that the Greys had favored nation status with our government's intelligence establishment. Curiously, much of the information shared by Falcon and Condor was consistent with Ronald Reagan's ET briefing from 1981. Despite earning dismal network ratings, this program was a milestone in UFO disclosure. However, whistleblower Robert Lazar, a physicist employed at Area 51, revealed in 1989 additional information that Falcon and Condor failed to mention, suggesting the Greys have had a long-standing proprietary interest in the human species. Lazar reported access to a classified document that revealed these beings said that they had been visiting Earth for a long time, and that man was the product of externally corrected evolution. They said that man as a species had been genetically altered 65 times. They referred to humans as containers, yet I don't know what we're containers of. These beings conveyed information about the capability of affecting the human brain to anesthetize the human body. This is done without any physical contact from a remote source. If this information is true, perhaps such a disturbing reality explains the official ambivalence toward disclosure. It's one thing to reveal alien visitors, but quite another to reveal alien harvesters, or worse, to reveal that our government is actively assisting such alien enterprises. Another half-hearted soft-sell disclosure attempt in 1988 involved UFO researcher and former NASA missions analyst Bob Exler, who was approached to serve as consultant on a project called Cosmic Journey. This enterprise, developed by Ringling Brothers, was to assemble a traveling exhibit of rocket and space technology, combined with UFO information, including an actual alien body in cryogenic freeze, to be showcased in cities across the United States. But this project was terminated at the time of George Bush Sr.'s election as president. And then again in the mid-90s, a similar project was under consideration by the city of Scottsdale, Arizona. A permanent space technology exhibit was proposed as a public works renovation project. This exhibit was also slated to include an extensive UFO information component as well. Noted researchers such as Bob Dean, Wendell Stevens, and Jim Dilatoso were to serve as consultants. My UFO art was to be featured in this project as well. But after several encouraging meetings with city planners, this public information project mysteriously evaporated. In 1995, Disney Corporation produced an astounding UFO documentary that was cautiously aired in only 5 cities across the country. In the 1950s, Disney had been approached by the Pentagon to produce films debunking UFOs. 40 years later, it seemed the government was using Disney Corporation for a reverse intent, selling the reality of alien life instead. This TV special was gently masked as a promotion introducing the newest George Lucas Tomorrowland thrill ride, designed to acclimate the public to their inevitable alien encounter. Of course, Alien Encounter was the name of the ride. Disney CEO Michael Eisner introduced this surprisingly candid documentary outlining the general history of our government's secret involvement with aliens since the famed Roswell crash in 1947. As well, this documentary revealed both the fact of our military's possession of captured aliens and spaceships, as well as its motivation for absolute secrecy. What you can't explain, they reasoned, you must deny. For governments determined to maintain their authority, extraterrestrial contact is pure dynamite. But again, this disclosure effort ran out of steam. The Disney UFO documentary was never aired nationally, and the Tomorrowland Alien Encounter ride was eventually replaced with little fanfare. Meanwhile, serious researchers were discovering darker evidence revealing the gray agenda. Rampant reports of abductions and cattle mutilations continued. As an abductee herself, the late Dr. Carla Turner speculated, if we are indeed a multi-purpose resource for the aliens, one which they want to continue to use, could they be performing the various reproductive genetic procedures in order to make alterations in their livestock that better serve the uses for which we are harvested? In 1997, the nation was horrified by the Heaven's Gate mass suicide scandal in San Diego, where members of a UFO cult took their own lives allegedly at the bidding of gray extraterrestrials. Thanks to full mass media coverage of this debacle, UFOs for a time became a virtually taboo topic. Were researchers unraveling too much truth behind the ET enigma? Clearly the danger remains that rather than simple conditioning to an ET reality, public perception can be steered or manipulated to benefit any number of covert agendas. The drift away from the benevolent alien scenarios to hostile invaders themes has become dominant in recent films, and none so explicit as National Geographic's television documentary, When Aliens Attack. Yet how can we hope to engage conventional defense tactics against enemy aliens capable of controlling our minds from a remote source, or who already have complete control over our nation's most sophisticated weapons installation? Is such spin cautionary warning of an impending war with ETs, or could it serve as a useful propaganda tool for a staged false flag alien attack to justify further need of the military-industrial complex? Vast monolithic defense industry conglomerates require vast monolithic military threats to justify their existence. Nobody ever got rich by profiteering from peace. The notorious report from Iron Mountain reminds us the existence of an accepted external menace, then, is essential to social cohesiveness as well as to the acceptance of political authority. The menace must be believable, it must be of a magnitude consistent with the complexity of the society threatened, and it must appear at least to affect the entire society. Have decades of popular media science fiction disclosure brought the population any closer to the truth regarding UFOs and extraterrestrials? Is the public really being conditioned or just conveniently befuddled? The primary motive for government non-disclosure of an extraterrestrial reality has been defined as protection of the existing political and economic order from collapse due to exposure to a more advanced extraterrestrial civilization. But does this rationale for non-disclosure actually provide a convenient excuse for decades of corporate and political abuse of power and wealth as well? Dr. Stephen Greer states, "This cover-up, no matter how well-intentioned initially, got carried away with its own secret power. It abused this power. It has hijacked our future for 50 years. The reasons for secrecy are clear. Global power, economic and technological control, geopolitical status quo, the fear of scandal surrounding the exposure of such projects, and their behavior." After World War II, much of our American science was preoccupied with advances in rocket technology for defense purposes and manned space exploration as well. But aside from providing spectacular television news footage, giant rockets were in fact a monstrous waste of energy. The advanced technologies discovered since the Roswell incident, whether German or alien or a combination of both, revealed chemical rockets to be clumsy, inefficient, and totally impractical for interplanetary space exploration. The secret to space travel was understanding and mastery of the unified field, the fundamental fabric of the space-time continuum itself. Ben Rich, the father of the stealth fighter bomber and former head of Lockheed Skunk Works, who was also in charge of operations from 1975 to 1991, confided just before his death in 1995 that the Black Ops Research Group had done just that, mastered field propulsion flight systems. He stated, "We now have the technology to take ET home. No, it won't take someone's lifetime to do it. We now have the capability to travel to the stars. First you have to understand that we will not get to the stars using chemical propulsion." Rich further confided that linear space travel was impractical, but that all points in space-time are connected. Field propulsion systems can transcend linear time, making interstellar space travel a workable practicality. In the span of time from 1947 to 1995, alien technological realities, at first intellectually shattering, had, according to Rich, become workable scientific practicalities to terrestrial engineers. So here's the disclosure disconnect. To preserve the status quo of national social stability, the Black Ops community directly involved with quantum technologies has become so far removed from mainstream Americana that it has evolved into a separate, high-tech empire unto itself. An elitist hybrid civilization literally disintegrated from its parent civilization. As well, spin-off technologies that could easily benefit the mainstream population appear to be deliberately withheld. So more than the cultural shock of an extraterrestrial reality, the economic shock of disclosing free energy quantum technologies would likely precipitate a global meltdown of the petroleum-dominated geopolitical infrastructure. Researcher and disclosure advocate Richard Dolan states, The basic idea of the breakaway civilization is simply that you have a secret group, a classified group of people with access to radically advanced technology, radically advanced science, and they just don't share it with the rest of the world. One scientific breakthrough leads to another, and that leads to another, and so on. So the next thing you know, you have a separate group of humanity that is vastly far beyond the rest of the world. I should think that members of the breakaway civilization might despair of ever educating the rest of humanity on what is going on. Their own reality is probably so far beyond our own, they may rightfully ask, how can they bring us up to speed without causing a worldwide psychological meltdown? Dolan further states, the implications of a UFO reality and cover-up are profound. It means that our society has lived in an official reality so incomplete, so inaccurate, that we may with justice call it fictitious. It means that the history we have learned, the science we think we know, and the very core of who we think we are, need to be rediscovered. With this in mind, perhaps the most devastating truth full disclosure would reveal is that antiquated mainstream Americana has become technologically irrelevant. In 2001, Newt Gingrich introduced the Age of Transitions, which showcased the National Science Foundation's workshop agenda to establish on this planet a new species of totally controlled bioengineered humans. Inevitably, the cybernetic enhancement of human performance is sneaking up on society. Dynamic advances in artificial intelligence technology are swiftly replacing human viability in our culture. In fact, the present exponential growth of bioengineering and computer technologies is about to marginalize the human factor altogether. In 1947, Dr. Hermann Oberth referred to the extraterrestrial biological entities allegedly recovered from the Roswell crash as humanoid robots rather than life forms, specifically engineered for long-distance travel through space or time. Today, eugenics science tells us that by the year 2045, the cybernetic post-human will have no gender, will be non-reproductive, and will be improved in the sense that it will be tailored to specific tasks. Would it not be shocking for UFO disclosure to ultimately reveal that the notorious gray aliens are in fact not aliens visiting from outer space at all, but genetically altered humans visiting from our own future?
We'll now hear from Richard Dolan for 10 minutes.
Thank you, distinguished members of the committee. And let me just say it's been an honor for me personally to be here with you all week, to be able to give statements to you and to chat with some of you privately as well. Regarding disclosure, I have often felt that disclosure on the matter of UFOs and ETs, possible extraterrestrials, is a paradox. It's impossible, but it is inevitable. It's impossible because there is no political motivation for it. It's inevitable, however, because our leaders are not the only factor in this equation. There are other beings, after all. But mainly, I would say there's us, the people, who are going through this greatest social, cultural, and especially technological transformation in the history of humanity. In fact, I would say that we are the game changers. Someday, and it won't be too long in the future, something is going to force someone's hand. It could be a major sighting, it could be a major leak, something that can no longer be denied. After all, we are fast approaching what experts in artificial intelligence call the singularity, when computing intelligence exceeds our own. In such a future, I ask you, can we really think we will still be stuck in neutral on this issue? Something will force the president's hand. He or she will finally hold that long-awaited press conference. and make that bombshell statement. It might go something like this. I have been advised by the National Security Council and heads of our intelligence community that there is a reality to some of the UFO phenomenon, in that some UFOs are real physical craft not manufactured by any known civilization on Earth, or words to that effect. It's the kind of statement that many proponents of UFO disclosure would like to hear, but the real question is, what next? Because there would be quite a few follow-up questions. At the top of the list will be questions about who these other beings are and what their agenda or agendas might be. And this will be a very difficult question for any president to answer. In the first place, there is a likelihood that even the leaders of the black budget or breakaway society that have been on top of this for years, they may not even know, or at least not fully. And what if they do know? And moreover, what if at least some of that answer includes information that might be upsetting? Divining the intentions of non-human visitors or permanent residents, whatever they may be, might not be the easiest thing to do. But it's entirely possible, judging from the data we do have, that some of them may not care very much about humanity. Some may not. And what if an agenda has been determined within the intelligence community, and this agenda includes something to do with alleged abduction phenomena? And even if that isn't true, does any president honestly believe he or she can contain rampant speculation along these lines? And even if the intentions of these other beings are said to be neutral or positive, there will clearly be tremendous suspicion by large swaths of humanity. This will not be an easy sell. There will already be a sizable number of people predisposed to interpreting these other beings as nothing less than demonic. Short of bringing one of these entities to a podium and subjecting it to hours and days and weeks of questions by an insatiable public, it's very likely that any moment of disclosure will not satisfy the public the way it would like to be regarding alien motivations. That's only the beginning of the problems. One early and obvious question that will arise, one which will have deep, profound political implications, will be very simple. How long have you managed to keep this secret all these years? Consider that our entire society has been told that UFOs do not represent anything truly anomalous, that ETs or aliens are definitely not here on Earth interacting with us, that UFO believers may be well-meaning but have been mistaken about all of that. This has been a mindset embedded within all of our major institutions. Our educational institutions, from primary school through universities and postdoctoral levels, throughout our major news organizations in which an open belief in UFOs is a third rail for one's career, throughout our scientific establishment for sure, and also throughout our political structure. Political careers have been destroyed, or at least severely undermined, by the UFO taint. Remember what happened to Dennis Kucinich in 2008 after it became known that many years before he had seen a UFO. Never mind the fact that the two witnesses he had been with came out and corroborated the sighting. They saw the same thing. All of these institutions and others have treated the UFO topic as nothing more than a joke, something suitable for immature minds. Can it really be that the professors throughout the United States uniformly have dismissed this phenomenon without any cooperation from the intelligence community? Ditto the world of science, politics, and media. Well, no, not when the most modest amount of research shows strong intelligence community influence over all of these institutions. In other words, people will see very clearly that the national security apparatus has created a global culture that has suffocated the truth. Researchers will begin to investigate in a serious way just how these relationships have undermined the credibility of all those institutions and undermined our apprehension of truth. The result will be a major cultural and institutional house cleaning, but it won't stop there. Citizens will naturally want to know specifics about the structure of secrecy itself. That is, they will want to know, if the U.S. president has been out of the loop all these years, as it seems, then who exactly has been in the loop? Who has been running the UFO cover-up? With due respect to Stephen Bassett, that's the phrase that I do use. If the answer is anything along the lines of my own research so far, it will show that the cover-up has long ago gravitated away from formal presidential authority into international and private hands. It's not that the U.S. president is a non-player in all of this, but rather is more like the public face of the true power elite that stands behind. We all, I think, have come to understand this when it comes to power in general, and this will likely be the case when we begin a sophisticated analysis of UFO secrecy. In other words, the moment of disclosure will trigger an intellectual revolution worldwide relating to the true structure of power on planet Earth. It will be a moment in which the world sees and acknowledges that the emperor has been wearing nothing at all. The political fallout will be tremendous, and a great battle will develop within the first year of disclosure. Think of it this way: just because the president has been forced into making an announcement doesn't mean that the CIA and all the other intelligence groups that have been managing this will simply walk away. There has been a concerted effort spanning an entire human lifetime to control this topic. A great deal has been invested, and mere disclosure is not going to change that. The real issue in the immediate post-disclosure world will be who controls the spin on the story. Because right away there will be a great divide, a chasm. Once this topic is available for open discussion, you can be sure that people around the world will be demanding answers. You can be just as sure that on the other side of the fence, information will be handed out as sparingly as possible. Government spin doctors will be out in great numbers trying to control the situation according to national security policy, although this time independent UFO searchers may get a public hearing that they hadn't gotten before. If the official spokespersons are making misleading or false statements, it's going to be a bit easier post-disclosure for independent researchers to point this out, because this time the world will be much more likely to listen. And there will be many, many more investigators into this topic after disclosure than there are today. How all that will turn out, only time will tell. There are so many other messy issues relating to global finance, energy, truth commissions, lawsuits, cultural transformations, cultural wars, religious and spiritual changes, scientific paradigm shifts, and ultimately geopolitical changes that will allow us to meet the challenge of, shall we call them others, here on planet Earth in some sort of coordinated, hopefully logical manner, and even more hopefully in some way that answers to the people rather than a handful of elite human players. And for that, we will need a groundswell of public pressure from below and tremendous political energy, ethics, and courage to take on the black budget culture that has dominated this subject for so long, and to begin a long, hard fight to reclaim some measure of freedom and dignity for humanity while we begin a new, better, and more mature phase of our existence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan.